Javisha, Javisha, Javisha.
This wounded, bloodied protester says, "I'm not scared. For 47 years, I've been dead." Is this the moment? Is this it? Could the world finally be waking up to an Iran without the Islamic Republic? That's what we're exploring today on Eye for Iran. British MP and former UK Security Minister Tom Tugendhat joins us.
Got to be honest, I think this is the endgame for the regime.
Then, US President Donald Trump's blunt warning to the Islamic Republic.
If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
We'll speak with former senior CIA official Norman Roule to get his take on what the U.S. will do.
History is going to judge this generation in Iran as one of the great models of courage. God bless them.
And later, why does this moment feel different from past protest waves? We'll break it down with Jason Brodsky from United Against Nuclear Iran and journalist and author David Patrikarakos.
Inspired by the Iranian people. I really do. They amaze me every week, truly, with the scenes that I see, brave scenes of civil disobedience.
Understand, a sane Iran is a benefit to the world, geopolitically, economically, culturally, and as a holiday destination. There's no downside. Everybody benefits. Long live Iran.
I'm Negar Mojtahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Former UK Security Minister and Member of Parliament in the UK, Tom Tugendhat, joins us now on Eye for Iran. Welcome, and thank you for being here, Tom.
Thank you very much for hosting me. It's lovely to be with you.
Likewise, Tom, dozens of people, protesters, have been killed in Iran. More than 2,000 people have been arrested. Iran-backed Iraqi militia forces, around 800 of them reportedly, are carrying out repression in the streets of Iran. There have been calls from opposition figures. Prince Reza Pahlavi has put out a call. Thousands of people are already out on the streets. 7 parties in the Kurdish regions have called for general strikes, and Azerbaijani groups have also called for mass demonstrations. It's clear that the Iranians are fighting back against a system that has ruled through fear for more than 4 decades. You've been following Iran for a long time, and you've advocated for policies as a member of parliament to combat the threat of the Iranian regime. How do you see this protest movement so far?
Well, I've got to be honest, I think this is the endgame for the regime. Whether you think it started with Mahsa Amini in 2022, or whether you think it started with the Green Revolution in 2009, either way, the reality is there are some really fundamental problems in Iran, and the most important one of which is that young people in Iran are not willing to live through the repression that has been going on for 47 years. So the reality is it's over. Now what we're watching is not whether or not the regime survives, but how many people does it try to kill, does it try to murder as it collapses. And I hope very much that those who are in charge, those who are supporting them, the senior members of the IRGC, the military, police, and others who have a decision to make, realize that they will be judged by the decisions and by the actions they take now, and that they can either arrange a peaceful transfer to the people of Iran, or they can defend the indefensible and face the consequences later.
So this is it?
I think this is it. Now, I don't mean that it's it tomorrow, or maybe not even next month. It may take, it may take beyond Nowruz. It may take the death of the supreme leader, who is now 86. I don't see how this regime achieves a peaceful transfer of power to his son, who seems to be, at the moment anyway, the only likely successor. So I don't see how the regime carries on for much more. It could be a few years, it's true, but those few years will be interspersed with more uprisings, more protests, sadly, probably more repression by regime-backed groups like the Iraqi militias you've been talking about. And it would actually just be more pain for the Iranian people with no change in the result.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, this is a protest against the entire system. So it's not just about replacing one man with another man from within that same clerical establishment.
That's right, and it's really interesting actually to hear His Highness Prince Reza Pahlavi speaking as he is, not as a future head of state or leader, but just as somebody who has got a very big voice internationally, which of course he does. He's an Iranian who has extraordinary reach, and what he's been able to do, which is remarkably impressive, is to bring different groups together. And you mentioned their Kurdish groups, Azeri groups. There are, in fact, Arab groups as well in the south, not just the Iraqi militias that you spoke about, and of course there are Baluch groups as well. And I'm ignoring the main group, which of course is the Farsi group, as it were, in the 50% of the country or something like that, who are out on the streets at the moment. So what we're seeing, I think, is we're seeing a fundamental rejection of the theocratic system of the Ayatollahs, of the corrupt IRGC, and the extraordinary wealth that has gone to some very, very few people.
Yeah, the wealth and the corruption. And you've described the Iranian regime as rotting from within. From where things stand right now, how long can they realistically go on like this?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not, I couldn't guess. I mean, I can imagine the regime falling tomorrow. I can also sadly see it possibly existing for another few years. I couldn't give you a date. All I can tell you is that the level of corruption within the system, all the way to the top, the level of wealth, the level of theft, and the brutality. Let's not forget the brutality. I mean, here in the United Kingdom, we've focused on the various different hostages who've been taken by the regime. But of course, to any Iranian, it's not about hostages. It's about daily life. You know, the women who are beaten for not even refusing to wear the veil, but simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the children who've been shot, people like Masih who've been shot simply for asking for rights that they should be born with. And so it's a level of repression and corruption that, frankly, is just no longer sustainable.
Yeah, and the mismanagement, so much so that it's affecting the air that they breathe and their access to water. It
Right,
means
exactly. I mean, this is one of the things that's really striking about the protests this time, which contrasts not only with 2022, but contrasts with 2008. 2009. In 2009, you'll remember during the Green Movement, those Basij militias, that branch of the IRGC that recruits from mostly rurally, I mean, it's a bit from all over, but it's mostly a rural movement, has responded in the past with extreme violence. It's been there on the streets with the regime. Well, they're coming from communities which are now really struggling with water shortages, really struggling with massive inflation. What is it now? It's 1.4 million, isn't it? Something
that's
like
correct,
that. I
yes.
mean, you know, it changes every day. Forgive me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be out of date by the time this is
This
broadcast.
airs, yeah.
Exactly. And we're already seeing over the last few months, the gold souks of the United Arab Emirates have been filled with Iranians buying gold. And they're not doing it because, you know, they're getting ready for Nowruz gifts. They're doing it because they're trying to get their money out of the rial into something that might last longer than a week. And that includes, sadly, that affects, sadly, literally everybody in the country who's watching food prices get out of reach, medicine prices go out of reach. So, you know, I think the difference this time in 2026 from 2009 is that it now just includes everybody.
Yes, and you just mentioned a very important point about gold allegedly leaving the country as a signal that it is the end, and they're preparing for what could come after. You've also raised something striking in the House of Commons, reports of Russian cargo planes landing in Tehran and about regime insiders looking for refuge abroad. You posted to X recently how many senior regime figures are now reaching out to foreign intelligence services, trading information in exchange for security if the system collapses. How much do you know?
Well, I think it's important to ask questions at a time like this because there are people now who are in Tehran, in Isfahan, all over the place, who are asking themselves quite seriously whether they should fight for the regime and whether they should murder their fellow citizens or whether they should look for a way out. And I just think it's worth people in that situation being aware that their leadership, who they think is loyal to them, will almost certainly even now be in conversation with intelligence agencies around the world, possibly Russian, possibly from other countries in the Middle East, looking for ways out. They're not going to go down with the ship. Why should you?
Yeah, and a major media French outlet is reporting now that some members of Pezeshkian's reformist camp are reaching out through an intermediary in Oman through the Americans to try and seek refuge, as well as Ghalibaf, a hardliner. Allegedly, his family has applied for visas in France, as well as the nephew of Hassan Rouhani.
Well, look, I'm not going to comment on any of those. I don't have a specific thing to tell you about any of those. But all I'm saying is that I have watched regimes collapse over the years that I was a soldier and over the years that I've been in politics, and then as the minister responsible for the security of the United Kingdom. And all I can tell you is there's a common theme. It gets to a point, maybe not yet, but soon, similar to this, where the elites, the princes, the ayatollahs in this case, decide that it's not worth fighting for. They look for somewhere to send their children, somewhere safe. They get their money out, they get their families out, and then they get out. And the people who are left, who sadly have to pay the price for their crimes, are those who are junior. And all I say to people is, before you commit crimes in the name of a regime that is dying or already dead, decide, ask yourself, where do you want to spend the next 10, 20 years of your life, and what do you think your children are going to say about you?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. And Tom, you've been very vocal, actually from day one, about the protests, both online and in Parliament. But I can't say the same for your Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Why the silence on Downing Street?
Well, you're going to have to ask him. You will understand I'm not a huge fan of our Prime Minister. I don't think he's doing a great job for the United Kingdom. And this is one of those areas where I'm very clear he should be more active. And the reason I say that actually is, let me be clear, is not about Iran. It's about Britain. My job as a member of Parliament, as a former minister, as a former soldier, is to protect the British people. I care about Iran. I value Iran, but it's not my job. My job is to protect Britain. Now, let me tell you that as security minister, I spent more time than I would have wished thinking hard about the level of violence the IRGC and indeed the Supreme Leader were trying to commit in the UK. There were at least 20 different occasions when they tried to murder or brutalize people, including on this channel, as you will be aware. And I had to spend hours and an awful lot of effort with police officers, intelligence officers, making sure we protected Iranian dissidents, Iranian journalists, and actually just ordinary British people from the violence of the Iranian regime. So let me be quite clear that the fall of the Iranian regime that has been exporting violence is in the interest of the United Kingdom. It's in the interest of free people all over the world. What the Iranian people choose to replace it with, that's up to you. That's not up to us.
Tell us more about why people in England and in the Western world should care about this moment.
Well, we've seen what the Iranian regime has done over recent years. And let's not go all the way back to 79. Let's just look at the last decade. Let's look at the money that came into the Iranian regime from the lifting of sanctions and the JCPOA. It was not used to build hospitals or roads or feed people in Iran. It was used to murder people in Syria. It led to hundreds of thousands of dead in Syria, maybe millions, we don't know, enormous numbers. That led to major population movements out of Syria into Turkey and then into Europe. And then look at what's happened since. We've seen the Houthis attacking shipping. And even if you have the most callous heart and you only care about money, that's put the price of goods up in Europe because the shipping routes have gone from, have added whatever it is. I think it's 10 days extra sailing time from China to Europe. And then look at what's happened in other parts of the Middle East. By inspiring Hamas on October the 7th to commit such barbarous acts, they led to, effectively, they used the Palestinian people as a hostage in the most cruel way. And it's absolutely horrific what you've seen. And then look at what's going on in Lebanon. I mean, again and again and again, I'm afraid, this regime has chosen not to support the Iranian people, not to think about the future of Iranian prosperity or happiness or culture or any of those things, but instead to destroy it and to use their position in order to bring violence and death and misery and not cooperation. So that's why it's in Britain's interest. Now, I hope with whoever replaces them, we'll have a fantastic relationship going back to times past, because I think the connections between the UK and Iran have actually only got stronger, ironically, because there are so many Iranians here in the UK now who I know actually want. I'm sure they like being in the UK, but I think they want to go home. And many of us, me in particular, actually, I would love to go and visit Iran. It's an amazing place, and when I learned Persian in Afghanistan, it was a great privilege to learn a beautiful language. I've forgotten most of it, sadly, but I'd love to go and visit the places where it's really from.
Well, hopefully you can soon. And let's widen this out from London to Europe. How are Western governments, in your view, viewing these protests right now? And what are you hearing about the thinking inside the European Union in Brussels, especially given as you mentioned, the growing concern over Iran's transnational repression within Europe?
Well, we've seen, I mean, the things that I spoke about in the UK, they're not just happening in the UK. We know they're happening in Germany, in France, and various other places as well. The IRGC has been an engine of violence, an enabler of terrorism, and also a major beneficiary of corruption. It's worth noting, actually, the connection with Venezuela, where drugs out of South America, often trafficked by Hezbollah, a proxy group of the IRGC, enabled by the IRGC, have been going into Europe. And, while the IRGC has been profiting from that crime, many Europeans have been dying from the consequences of drugs. So, this is something that is really seriously not just a British problem, it's a European and wider world problem. And we're seeing, sadly, not enough response, if I'm honest, out of European countries, similar to the government of the United Kingdom. And we do need to see people realizing what we're dealing with here. There seems to be far too much silence over an issue that is now affecting tens of millions of people in the Middle East, and in fact could affect many more if it is not resolved soon.
And why is that? I mean, on a very basic level, whenever there's a crisis in the Middle East, that leads to a flood of migration and immigration to countries like in the UK, right? On a basic level, Iran is a big exporter of energy. That's going to bring up energy prices with the more sanctions and restrictions and limitations that are placed on Iran that affects, bills in the United Kingdom and across Europe. So why the silence? Why is it just a level of ignorance? Do they not understand? I mean, I'm sure that these are quite basic things.
Well, I'm afraid it's really hard for me to answer, because you're explaining exactly why I have been speaking about it. Forgive me, as I say, I have nothing but affection for Iran and the Iranian people. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because it's affecting the UK. It's affecting the security of the UK, and it's affecting the cost of living and the energy prices and all those other things in the UK. And it's affecting the same across Europe. So I am surprised at the level of silence. I suspect a lot of it's down to lack of knowledge and lack of understanding. But that's why I'm pleased to be on your podcast, and I'm writing so much about it as well, because I think people need to be aware of what's going on.
Actually, I was watching a podcast you recently did, I think just yesterday, with LBC. And the host was quite shocked to learn about the connection between Venezuela and Iran. And I was thinking to myself, isn't that a given? Doesn't everybody know about the economic and military connection between the two nations?
Well, I think the answer is sadly no, they don't. And so the perception was that Venezuela was all about drug trafficking into the United States and Chinese energy. And it's like, I mean, sure, it is a bit, right? But it's actually much closer connection to the Islamic regime, where we're seeing, those shadow banking services trying to get around sanctions. We're seeing Venezuelan passports, including diplomatic passports, being used by Hezbollahis and guys from the IRGC in order to get around visa bans. So we're seeing a whole pattern of criminality, as it were, state-enabled criminality out of Venezuela that just doesn't seem to be fully appreciated. In fact, you're even seeing it on the BBC. I know, forgive me, or if I'm allowed to mention it, your rivals in BBC Persian service are aware of it, but the BBC World Service and the BBC in the UK doesn't seem to have quite picked up on it.
Yeah, no, and now the regime has a lot less room to maneuver, right? With so many losses since October 7th, actually. Now the loss of Syria, of Venezuela, the weakening of their proxies. It seems like they have less room to do things now.
Well, I think that's right. And of course, the other thing that's very clear is their Russian allies are not in any position to help. They're completely consumed by their own miserable misadventure in Ukraine, where they're murdering Ukrainians for no gain at all. And so what we're watching is Iran's wider circle of allies, as it were, collapsing. And the Chinese government has in the past done business with the Iranians, but I think calling them allies would be overstating it massively. I think they're just benefiting from the fact that Iran doesn't have anyone else to sell its energy to.
Yeah, it's definitely a beneficial relationship that China's gaining something from Iran.
Sure,
In
but
this.
it's
No,
not a strategic partnership like
no.
with Russia or
Well, like
Venezuela.
with Russia, exactly, exactly. And a more like a broader policy question here: is there unofficially or officially any planning in the UK or amongst any Western governments for a post-Islamic scenario?
So I can't answer that, I'm afraid. I don't know. I hope that the Foreign Office is thinking about how we should engage and with whom and through whom, and whether that means directly or whether it means through partners in the region like Oman, as you mentioned before. I don't know. But it is quite clear that we should be preparing for that, because whether the regime falls tomorrow or in 2 years' time, this regime is over. There's no question about it. This regime is over. And what we need to be doing is making sure that when that happens, whatever happens, whoever the Iranian people choose is able to govern. And it doesn't lead to a series of chaotic transfers of power, but actually instead enables that enormous surge of investment from Iranians around the world that would liberate capital and then see massive investment in Iran, not just doing good for the Iranian people, building roads, schools, and hospitals, but actually doing good for the world. If Iran can get back to exporting 6, 7 million barrels of oil per day, then energy prices come down and prosperity goes up. But actually, at a much more fundamental level, if the intelligence and ingenuity and brilliance of the Iranian people were released, then I don't know what ideas will come next. But I tell you what, I'm looking forward to seeing them.
And we touched on Venezuela. Let's talk more broadly about President Donald Trump. And what do you think of his response so far
Forgive me, to what?
to the protests?
Oh, I see. Well, my own view is that this is a matter for the Iranian people. I think it's entirely appropriate for foreigners like me to talk about the effect that this has on our country or to observe the nature of collapsing regimes. But it's up to the Iranian people. I mean, we're not involved in this. We won't get involved in it. The Iranian people are quite clearly demonstrating remarkable courage already. They don't need any support or encouragement from me. It's perfectly clear that they're capable of doing it themselves. I don't think we should be getting involved. What I think we should be doing is preparing to support whatever the Iranian people choose comes next. Now, some people are calling for the restoration of the monarchy. Some people are calling for democracy. Others are just calling for the overthrow of the Ayatollahs. Whatever people choose, that's up to them. It's not up to us.
But the geopolitics is still really interesting here. I mean, when you look back to 2009 and in the Green Movement, Iranians were asking for help from Obama. And Obama, I think, came out and said, he condemned the repression and things like that. But he said, we're watching you. And now you've got a president who says, we'll kill you.
Well, he's certainly got his own use of language, hasn't he? And in many ways, what he's done already, of course, by striking in Venezuela is to intervene in the Iranian protests. I mean, effectively what he's just done, and he hasn't done it in Iran, but he's just cut off the Ayatollah's bank account. He's just cut off his arms manufacturing capability in Venezuela. He's cut off his drugs business, and he's cut off his ability to fund and support proxies. So, it's a pretty powerful piece of action by the President of the United States. Now, I know there are other routes, there are other ways in which the Iranian regime can do that, but let's be clear. Venezuela was very, very important, and so we're seeing a really big change now. Whether he should do more, look, my own view is that the Iranian people are perfectly capable of doing what they need to do. And the American actions, when was it? A few months ago now, when Israel and America together attacked, first of all, the nuclear sites, but then also decapitated some of the senior military. I think that was very powerful as well. It demonstrated two things. First of all, those who think that they're safe and can hide despite their massive human rights violations and crimes, well, they can't. Secondly, precision strikes in Tehran and around the country are not only possible, but have been done. And thirdly, all the lies that the Iranian people have been told about how, the Ayatollah has made the country into some sort of feared giant, they're complete rubbish. He's wasted billions and billions and billions of dollars on vanity projects that have utterly failed, that have left his people poorer and weaker, and all they have done is murdered, people around the Middle East, predominantly, let's be honest, Sunni Muslims around the Middle East who have been murdered by this regime. And sadly, the consequences of that will live on way beyond the life of the current supreme leader.
Yes, it's an Islamic Republic that kills more Muslims than anybody, really.
Oh, vastly more. I mean, I don't know what percentage of. I mean, they keep telling us that Israel is their prime enemy, or America is the great demon, or we are. But maybe 1% of their victims have been Israelis or Jews or Americans or Brits. Maybe 1%. 99% have either been Sunni Muslims or, in fact, Baha'is in Iran or Christians in Iran. It's a very, very vicious regime that has mostly killed its own.
And killed its own people, yes. And we spoke about Donald Trump and that the Iranian people are obviously capable and out there on the streets, en masse. But at the same time, they appear in social media messages to be asking for help. They're saying, Donald Trump, don't let them kill us. They're even renaming some streets in Iran after Trump. What do you make of that appeal?
So I see that, and look, I completely understand it. I'm just, forgive me, I'm a Brit, and our interventions in Iran over the last century or two have not always been very positive. I think
You can say that again.
I think it's, I think if we don't learn those lessons, then what are we here for? So I'm very, very cautious about intervention. I don't think it's appropriate. I think the right thing to do is to be prepared to support when the change happens. But it's up to the Iranian people to make that change or not. It's up to them.
And as a former security minister, where does Iran fit in today's global security order, as you see it now with the chaos unfolding?
Well, up until a few weeks ago, it's been one of the principal security threats to the United Kingdom. I mean, there's no question about it. Over the last week or so, it's been pretty distracted. And so that has diminished. I wouldn't say gone, but diminished a bit. It could come back if the regime manages to silence the protests. But as I say, I mean, if it does, it's only a temporary silencing. The protests will be back, I don't know, in weeks, months, or a few years, but they will be back. What the Iranian state should be, the Iranian country should be, is a partner in an international system that sees prosperity and opportunity for everyone. I mean, it is remarkable that the country that gave us every element of extraordinary culture that we've, everything from chess to Shiraz wine, is now an exporter of terror rather than joy. It's completely inappropriate. It's completely against Iranian history as well.
Yeah, an exporter of terror rather than joy. Hopefully things will start to change soon. Tom, any final concluding thoughts or a message to the people of Iran that you'd like to get out there?
Well, my message is a simple one. We're deeply impressed. I'm personally deeply impressed with your courage, and many, many people I speak to in Parliament and around the UK are extraordinarily impressed with your courage. And we hear from Prince Reza Pahlavi and from many, many other voices what's going on in Iran. Many of us have friends in Iran who somehow or other manage to get messages out and communicate. And we look forward to you rejoining the family of nations as a proud and independent and free nation.
Thank you so much. That's Tom Tugendhat joining us on Eye for Iran.
Thank you.
Former CIA official and Iran expert Norman Roule is here with us on Eye for Iran. Thank you so much and welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thousands of Iranians are out on the streets. This is not "Where's my vote" in 2009. This is not the women life freedom that we saw in 2023 and 22. This is literally a call for an end to this regime. How would you assess the U.S. response so far? And what do you think President Trump's next move will be at this critical juncture?
Well, thank you for having me. This is truly an extraordinary moment. We're watching the fifth round of nationwide protests that Iran has seen within 9 years. But this is quite different. We're watching a regime that is clearly in its dying days. That is an oppressive regime, and a people that are clearly tired of a government that is unable to satisfy even the basic standard of living requirements. For the United States, wants to ensure that it first does no harm, that it is able to support the Iranian people, but this is a decision the Iranian people have to make on their own terms, in their own time, and in their own way. And that whatever it does not empower or enable the Iranian government to undertake activities that it then justifies using Washington's decision to act against the Iranian demonstrators. President Trump's actions have been the most robust of any president since 1979. And in light of his actions in June against Iran, which were historic, and his actions in Venezuela, they're absolutely something the Iranian government should, and I believe is taking seriously. So I believe they've already constrained likely Iran's behavior. And this is something which I believe is probably having some impact on the ongoing unrest.
And of course, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in 2019, which shows, based on his actions, that when President Trump says something, oftentimes, yes, he means it. So how do you suppose President Trump is going to react next? I mean, he did say that he would come in and hit Iran strong if they continue to kill protesters, which they are. More than 2,000 people have been arrested. Dozens of people have been killed. Do you see maybe some sort of surgical strike or operation happening in Iran? Not boots on the ground, but some sort of involvement in that sense.
Well, President Trump has a record of living up to his word. And again, you correctly cited the killing of Qasem Soleimani. And I think we should begin there because the president and his administration at the time provided multiple warnings to the Iranian government to halt its support for terrorism. And then when took several escalatory steps prior to that operation to warn off the Iranian government before that operation. And then also conducted a very surgical, limited operation. And then when you're looking at the operation in June, that was also surgical, limited, and preceded by multiple warnings. So we've got now warnings, multiple warnings. And I think we've seen also in Venezuela surgical operations preceded by months of warnings through the Venezuela blockade. So we've had warnings. So I would anticipate that it would be precise, surgical, highly impactful, highly powerful, highly consequential for those who were involved in any violence against demonstrators. And therefore, the Iranian government should take this warning very seriously.
Would that mean going after the supreme leader himself?
It is unlikely, but nothing should be ruled out. Obviously, I don't speak for the Trump administration, but the Trump administration has shown a careful attention to an escalatory ladder and has also shown attention to focusing on individuals that are involved in actual operations that, in essence, have an impact on the issues themselves. So in the case of Qasem Soleimani, he was directing terrorist operations that would have had hundreds of casualties, and his elimination halted those operations, according to the Trump administration. In the case of the attacks on the nuclear sites, that halted the weaponization of Iran's nuclear program, but there were not strikes on Iran's leadership officials at the time. And again, in the operation against Nicolas Maduro, he was the individual against whom the indictment was placed, and it was not other individuals at the time. So I think it will be focused against those targets that have the most impact to protect terror protesters themselves, as well as against those actors who are responsible for threats or activities against protesters who are peacefully undertaking their right against this terrible regime.
That's interesting. So going after the regime apparatus that would be responsible for terrorizing the Iranian people.
Facilities and perhaps personnel.
Wow. And let's talk power. Just how relevant is Ali Khamenei in your view?
He is the supreme leader. He has the capacity to rule Iran, but I think we have to look back and say where the country is and what he could do to change it. Right now, you're looking at a system that is no longer capable of either satisfying the demands of its people, but it's also not capable of change, and it appears no longer capable of survival. It's not capable of disguising the rot in the system. This system looks very much like the final days of the Soviet Union, where you have a regime where even the most ardent adherents to the regime aren't able to pretend that the ideology is something that they support, or that the ideology has a chance of fulfilling its hopes. You probably are looking at a leader who saw his personal dreams for the revolution die in the helicopter accident that killed then President Raisi in near Azerbaijan. And since that time, you get the sense that this is an individual whose world each year has grown smaller as his adversaries have grown more successful, as his allies have become fewer, literally dying in many cases, but also as the Gulf states have undertaken this extraordinary social and technological and economic revolution where they're developing this amazing economy and lifestyle, whereas Iran is not. And this extraordinary people that the Iranians have, this extraordinary history, is being held back, and he is responsible. Now, in theory, he is the supreme leader and could undertake the changes that could either redistribute power, that could create a new society, that could shift authorities to take power away from the unelected officials who are denying the president the right to undertake the economic decisions needed to change this, but he's not doing it. So you've got a leader who is unable to effect change, unable to enable the revolution to survive, unable to sustain that revolution. It's not an effective example of leadership.
And what do you think about this scenario that a lot of analysts have brought up about the potential for a so-called, strong man within either the military or the IRGC to do a coup d'etat of some sort and just get rid of Khamenei? How would you, if that is likely, how would they be able to separate themselves from the Islamic Republic system? Because it's not just about this one man at the top. There's an issue. It's a systemic issue.
Well, for many years, we've watched much of Iran's system be dominated by individuals who have a connection to the Revolutionary Guard, either former members of the Revolutionary Guard or individuals who owe their political or financial success to the Revolutionary Guard and its associated businesses. It's not going to be much of a surprise if the next generation of leadership comes from that element of Iranian society. Now, how that individual is characterized or what sort of individual that might be, I don't know. Now, whether that is a strong man, a powerful president, prime minister, a supreme leader, I don't know. And in the United States, we have a tremendous amount of data at our disposal, but predicting who will be the next president is impossible. So I think we ought to have a level of humility as to how we're going to what sort of government Iran will have after the collapse of the Islamic Republic. But we can state that it is likely going to have, based on the social and demographic nature of the society at present, some strong connection to the system, the nizam that the Revolutionary Guard and its adherents have created since 2003.
And would it change anything?
It's possible not. It's possible that you have a regime that is more engaging of the international community, just as robust and aggressive in asserting its interests, perhaps more willing to engage in terms of commercial deals and willing to engage in political relationships. But it's also entirely possible that it will drop some of aspects of its Islamic nature or downplay some of those elements. But it will probably be a transformation that will take some years to play out, vice an immediate transformation. I mean, we're watching Venezuela go through its own transformation. A system is usually not one man or two men or three men. We're watching a social network that has many layers to this. A government is a structure that has a series of layers and adherents and that have been put in place through many years of promotions. And that will take a while to shift. Only in sudden revolutions, such as you had in 1979, that are dramatic and violent, do you have this capacity for such a dramatic a shift in very different directions. If Iran does not move in that dramatic, painful, and violent shift, it's more likely that these other changes will be more gradual.
And when you compare it to 79, what do you see now in terms of what you just described? Are you seeing those elements and mechanisms in place?
In many ways, yes. You have a leadership that is of a similar age, as a similar worldview. Their worldview is not the 1979 revolution. The average age of Iran's revolutionary leadership is in the 80s, the 90s, centenarians. Even the Iran-Iraq war, that great cauldron that shaped so many of Iran's leaders, is a distant memory, or a memory that many Iranians don't have because they were quite young. I think about 65% of Iranians were born after or were very young at the time of the Iran-Iraq war. So you've got really much of Iran has a worldview that was shaped post 2003. So that's a world of sanctions. That's a world of the Iraq War. Saddam is not part of that picture. It's a world of the regime of Hezbollah and being shaped very differently in the region. Of the United States having a very different reputation of 9/11. It's a very different worldview, but it's also a worldview where, for a number of years, the Iranian leadership thought they could succeed and push back against the West and get away with it and tolerate it and be tolerated by the international community, which in essence let them get away with missile strikes and drone strikes against not only a number of countries, 5 or 6 countries, but to sell drones to Russia, etc. Only now do you have the Trump administration and Israel and the June war changing that perception. So it's a very different generation than you faced in the past. And of course, this generation has been exhausted and their hope shattered by the tremendous disappointments and disillusionments of the Islamic Republic.
Yeah, and many critics argue, definitely for many years, a policy of appeasement, at least in terms of how they saw it. And I'm just really curious, from all your years in intelligence, and just speaking in very general terms, when events like what we're seeing in Iran unfold, where it's volatile, where things are changing rapidly, how does the U.S. assess that and respond in real time? And is it possible to have a fixed strategy?
Well, I think let me speak about this in a different way. Uh, when events roll out, analysts in the government or outside of the government are best suited if they withhold immediate judgments. Facts aren't always immediately available. The story often needs to take a little while to roll out. If, for example, the immediate question after the apprehension of Nicolas Maduro was what happens next? And you had a dramatic shift in how the world saw Venezuela from the first couple of hours to a week later. But the best position is let's give this a little bit of time to roll out. Let's look at all sources of information. And the reason for that is when you're looking at a society, it's usually not a cut and dried position. Often you're looking at different polities that themselves have to sort out what this means in their world. So in the case of Venezuela, this isn't just the issue of Nicolas Maduro and his wife arriving in New York. This is the case of the leadership of Venezuela saying to themselves, well, not only what does this mean for ourselves and the Venezuelan people, but how will Cuba respond in the U.S. Congress? How will China respond? How will the international community respond? How will Russia respond itself? And that takes a few days. And until all that data comes together, the situation itself isn't clarified. So to immediately say, what does this mean? It's not wise to jump to that conclusion, and therefore I caution people to be careful of those who immediately say, "Let me tell you what has just happened," because unless have a history of successful lottery numbers, they're not going to be very terribly reliable.
And based on that model that you just described, how do you how would you describe the situation unfolding in Iran right now?
Well, I think we've got data and we've got history and we've got information rolling out. So what do we see? We see in Iran sort of two columns of data. The first is almost like compounding interest, years of disillusionment building on itself because of unemployment, failed economic policies, corruption, nepotism, the income disparity, the collapse of the currency. At the time of the Iran nuclear deal, the currency was about 29,500 to the dollar. When the recently dismissed central bank governor was put in his position, the currency was 950,000 reals to the dollar. And of course, now it's 1.42 million reals to the dollar. And there's no reason to believe that this currency won't keep collapsing, unfortunately for the Iranian people. This builds on itself and it creates an endless pressure. So the Iranian government is dealing with an endless pressure, and you've seen how it's responded over the past 5 sets of periods of unrest, and that response has been almost identical. It's been rhetoric. It's been tactical responses. It's been repression. It's been threats of striking Israel. It's been blaming the West for for stirring up the repression. And of course, it's at the same time, it's made no changes to its policies, which feed on themselves because those policies include funding missile tests, funding the Quds Force, which of course creates more sanctions pressure, which feeds upon that first column. Now, at the same time, they have whittled away at the internal political system. There is no reliable, or there is no power center that can compete with the supreme leader. He has ensured that there is no one who can stand up against him. But in a sense, that's now denied the regime a power center to rely upon. And of course, they have had multiple arrests in every period of protest, so that each time they've taken apart the opposition. And the opposition then must sort of reinvent itself each time. But because it's able to reinvent itself, it shows that this is organic and this is not something that the government is capable of stopping. So if you were to take an analytic judgment from this, you're able to say nationwide, widespread, unstoppable government rot, government incapable of the decisions to stop this. It's a government that can sustain itself, but is incapable of the decisions that can stop this. And sooner or later, something is going to happen to overwhelm this incompetent system, because all they can rely upon is oppression, and hope that a miracle will happen. It's really an extraordinary situation of politics. I mean, think about it. There was a time when the Iranian government used to brag that its elections had a voter turnout that gave it a popularity that exceeded anything in the Middle East. And in the last presidential election, they put forward President Pezeshkian, obviously because they had hoped that his popularity would draw in a voter turnout, and it was an embarrassingly low turnout, a historical low turnout. That you can't hide the rot, you can't hide the disillusionment any longer. So it's just the truth is there, and the Iranian people deserve this support. Now, at the same time, the Iranian people have the Iranian government has another plus. The international community has done darn little about this. Other than the President of the United States comments, you have an international community which generally says, we're unhappy with this, we don't like this, we stand with the Iranian people, and we're happy to meet Iranian officials when they come to our country. Previous Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, a man known for his mendacity, literally was invited to and spoke at the Davos Economic Forum earlier last year. And the idea that you would have a man who has been the face of a regime that has brought such suffering on its people sitting in Davos tells you something as much about the Europeans and the people present as it does about the Iranian regime itself. So there's a lot of different ways to slice the analysis that goes with this issue.
Yeah, I was just speaking with ex-UK Security Minister Tom Tugendhat, and he said exactly what you said, and the silence right now coming from Downing Street in the UK.
Minister Tugendhat is an extraordinarily wise and very well read and experienced official. He's one of the more experienced and most experienced and most informed officials in the international community today.
I agree. Norman, is there any final concluding thoughts that you'd like to get out there? Something we haven't touched on?
We're watching once more the tenacity of the Iranian people and the courage, and it's often talked about in media, and it's often applauded, and rightfully so. But if there is a model for humanity of hope and of courage and of our aspirations of where we should all strive to be in this world. I think we're looking at this taking place in a lot of Iranian cities and towns today, of people who are standing up for their children and their tomorrows. So you see a lot of cynicism in the world, and you see a lot of disappointment and disillusionment, and many people are content to express that through a stiff-worded tweet. But we're watching people put themselves on the line year after year after year for their children's tomorrow. And I think history is going to judge this generation in Iran as one of the great models of courage and responsibility for us all. So we have many stains on our generation, but what's happening in the Iranian protests is not one of them. God bless them.
And on just a personal question, as someone who's been following and studying Iran for many years, how do you feel right now? What's the feeling you have?
I've been watching this for more than 40 years, and I've never lost faith or hope in the Iranian people. I've never lost I've never lost my faith or hope in the Iranian people. I think I'll just leave it at that for this moment.
That means a lot. Thank you so much. That's Norman Roule joining us today on Eye for Iran. For the latest on these extraordinary scenes, we're joined by Jason Brodsky, the policy director at United Against Nuclear Iran, and David Patrikarakos, a journalist, a special correspondent with the Mail, and author of Nuclear Iran. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
You know, as someone of Iranian origin, and David, I know that you understand this and feel it. And Jason, you're basically an honorary Iranian, so I know that you're feeling a lot of emotions right now. It's been an emotional past few days. Just watching these videos, I'm floored by it's just incredible, the bravery, the scenes that we're seeing. There's this one video of an older Iranian woman. She looks to be maybe in her 60s or 70s, and she's got her fists in the air. Her face is wounded and bloody, and she says, "I'm not scared. I've been dead for the past 47 years. Dead for the past 47 years." And I just have to ask myself, and it feels different this time. There's just something different than 2022, than 2009, than even in 2019. And I should also add that this week is the 6th anniversary of the downing of Flight 752, where hundreds of dual nationals, hundreds of Canadians were killed when the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps shot down a passenger aircraft with not one but 2 surface-to-air missiles. What do you guys think? Is this it? David, I'll start with you and then Jason.
So look, first of all, I think all of us on this pod and across Iran and across the world are feeling incredible emotions at the scenes that we're seeing. As you say, let's start on a purely human level. The bravery of these people, unarmed in the streets against one of the most brutal regimes, certainly of this century. It's a sight to behold, and we express always our solidarity with them. Solidarity that has been too often lacking in the past. Moving towards something more, I guess, practical, are they different this time? I think when we assess the Iranian uprisings, when we assess any revolution, it comes down to a few things. Number one is who's involved. Number two is where are they spreading? And number three, what is the reaction of the regime? Now, we are all of us doomed to follow these things on social media by video. So sometimes, perhaps in the past, it has looked like the whole country is rising up, when in fact it is perhaps certain segments of cities. Now, these protests are spreading. I'm not saying that they're everywhere, that they're in every town and village, but they're spreading. When I see throngs in Mashhad, the home of the former President Raisi, this conservative religious place, that to me says the regime has big problems. The second is who's involved. Well, it's not just North Tehranis or whatever the stereotype is now. It's not just students from the Kuye Danishgah, where I learned Persian badly many years ago. It is the bazaris. It is people worried about the real. It is people sick to death of oppression. It is women sick to death of being forced to veil up. It is all sections of society now. And the third, of course, is what is the regime reaction? Is the regime united? Are we going to see it crack? Are we going to see mass defections of the police, of the army, eventually the Revolutionary Guard? Now, I think the third limb of this is still unknown. The regime so far is holding. But there is another factor in this, and that is now Donald Trump, who has come out and said, that we are locked and loaded. We are ready to go if you start massacring the protesters. Now, Donald Trump says a lot of things that he doesn't do. But if the Ayatollahs are tempted to think that he's purely bluffing, I suggest they take a look at the ruins of their nuclear facilities. So we don't know yet. Now, this is a revolutionary regime. It came to power in 1979 by overthrowing the Shah. It was always smart. In 2009, the Green Revolution, they never did what Assad did. They never did what Mubarak did. You never saw tanks on the street. You never saw mass brutality. They strategically executed people, sent the Basij amongst the protesters. What do they do now? They have to walk this tightrope between cracking down without open massacres that might bring the hammer of Donald Trump in the United States down on them. It's a very tricky position for them to be in, and I, for one, am delighted that they're in this tricky position. Long may it continue, and let's hope they fall soon.
Jason?
Well, it's great to be with you, Negar. And I think the Iranian people are inspiring the world with their bravery. I salute them. They have suffered under this regime. They are the regime's greatest victims. And I think we all have to step back and admire their courage under fire, literal fire. So I think the Iranian people have the singular ability to expose the regime for its illegitimacy, its being irredeemable, and for its lies that it's built for itself over the past 4 decades. And I think that's why the regime is afraid of them. That's why the regime fears the power of the Iranian people, the mobilization of the Iranian people. So I just want to salute them and to say to all the Iranians who were listening to this around the world that we're all with you, and we hope victory will come soon. I would say that what makes this protest different from other protests is I view the 2025 to 2026 protests as really not an outlier, but a continuation, really, in Iran's protest movement against the regime, which has been going on for years now. I view the 1999 and 2009 cycles of protest as really speaking in the language of reform of the system. But since that time, I think the Iranian people have come to the conclusion that the Islamic Republic can't be reformed, and therefore it has to be overthrown. So since 2017 onward, so from 2017 to 2018, 2019 with the gas protests, 2022 Mahsa Amini protests, and now 2025 to 2026, we are seeing a clear regime change tint to these protests. And so I view this latest round of demonstrations as just a continuation of a process which has steadily eroded the power of the Iranian regime. And the Iranian people are also emboldened, I think, by President Trump and his message, without a doubt, but by also the weaknesses and the regime's blows that it has suffered over the last few years. I think that what makes the different from 2022 is that now the regime's broader proxy network has been badly eroded. Its nuclear program is in shambles, its military has been dented, and the myth of the invincibility of the all-powerful nature of the Iranian regime has been really shattered by a decisive application of force by the United States and Israel. And so the Iranian people are watching all of this very closely, and I think they say, look at how the regime is not as powerful as we have been led to believe it is. And no doubt, make no mistake, the men with the guns are still the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its Praetorian Guard. But at the same time, I think that they have seen how incompetent and weak the regime has been made to feel over the last couple of years. And all of these things, all of these different factors are coming together to produce the chemistry of this moment.
Yeah, and you can add Venezuela to the mix as well, and the message
Absolutely.
that sends to the Iranian regime. And Jason and David, this continuation of this movement that you mentioned just now, Jason, do you guys see it ultimately as, I mean, because I would imagine that this continuation can't sustain itself forever. Is this the moment?
Well, I think it's going to really depend on a few different factors, whether Iranians can translate the demonstrations and the protests that they are bravely undertaking into a coherent political alternative to the Islamic Republic. That's number one. That's a big test. Number two are whether they are able to get defections within the security services. That's another big test. And also defections within the political elite of the Islamic Republic. And I look at all of those as signposts as to the strength of the current moment, in addition to the convergence of political and labor protests, because all of those have precedence in Iranian history as producing revolutions. And right now, I think that all of especially the convergence of labor and political protests, and the building of a political alternative to the Islamic Republic, I see the seeds of that building right now. We're not there at the moment, and I think we have to be humble in our predictions of the Islamic Republic's demise. But I see the seeds of all of this building, and I view the protest process as not happening overnight, but happening over years sometimes, a gradual, steady erosion of the power of the Islamic Republic.
And what do you think, David? Like, could the Trump administration work out some sort of negotiated deal with maybe a member of the military, something like what we saw, in the Arab Spring, where the military took over? Or would it be just a system failure without lack of, or could the opposition come in that's out in the West?
So I think Jason makes a couple of really good points there. I think the idea that, people were on the streets for decades looking for reform is now over. It's just, there's regime, and it's not going to stop. This regime, as well as being brutal and sadistic, is completely incompetent. Completely incompetent. They're talking about having to move out of Tehran because of drought. I mean, the money that has been wasted, the huge...
And they just offered $7 a month or something, which was a great insult. If anything, that probably made it worse for them.
Of course, especially to Iranians who are very quick to take offense at things, as I know, personally, having had an Iranian mother. So look, I think this is a very, very important point. Now, oddly enough, when I think about possibility of regime change, what I look to, actually, funny enough, is the Islamic Revolution. Now, I always say, when Khamenei was in exile, it took about 2 years for those cassette tapes that, that he had his sermons on to be smuggled into Iran, to percolate around Iran. And eventually they mobilized hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, the Shah also did things, there are other things. During the Arab Spring, Facebook did this in hours. But here's the difference. As soon as the Shah fell, Khomeini was there to take over. Okay, yes, he was with other leftist Democrats that he then, completely betrayed. Mubarak fell. They won, but there was no one to take his place. There was a void. Into it stepped the Muslim Brotherhood, and then you have Sisi, who in many ways is worse than Mubarak as an autocrat. So I still think there is no, and I once said this to someone, they got to an audience, they got very offended because they didn't realize what I was saying. I said, there is no Khomeini. Like, we don't want another Khomeini. I said, I don't mean a literal Khomeini, but you know what I mean. So I think there's a problem. Now, there are a lot of people, especially in the States, who talk about, Reza Pahlavi Jr. I'm not quite sure he has what it takes to govern Iran, but perhaps as a transitional figure. And I will say one thing. He's actually, surpassing my expectations at the moment. He's been quite statesmanlike. I'm still not sure the degree to which he has wide-scale popularity in Iran, but hold on a minute. Everything is changing. As we're all saying here, things are changing. People are now looking for a change. Like, this is the end. It's not reformable. As a transitional figure, as even a symbol. I don't think Iranians want to go back to monarchy. I don't think anyone's talking about that. But I think now the process is, as Jason says, it's not immediate, it's not tomorrow with the caveat anything can happen, but we need to see some sort of formalized opposition. And right now it does not exist. Who in the military could they make a deal with? I don't know. Look, if the regime, Khamenei finally is dying. I always say Ayatollahs like Oxford Dons, they live forever, but he's finally dying. When he dies, they were talking about Mojtahedi, he was going to take over. You notice during the 6-day exchange, by the way, the 12-day exchange, I never call it the 12-day war. This war's not over. The Iranians haven't surrendered. But when he announced succession, Mojtahedi was not mentioned. Now, some people say, he didn't want to make the Israelis wise to it. I think they're probably quite aware. But I think when he dies, it's going to be a bit of a void. There are going to be a lot of people jostling for power. The regime's going to be even weaker. So I think the trend is all to the good. But until there is a credible opposition to take power, even if it falls, then...
What do you think, Jason, about that?
Things, it can fall, and it has to be replaced by something good. It's no good to anyone if the mullah's fallen. It's worse what comes in. Sorry.
No. Thank you. I appreciate that. And also I wanted to add that it depends what the Iranians will accept too, right? Because it's not just about that one man at the top. It's an entire system that's been built on this fear and repression that is the Islamic Republic. What are your thoughts on that, Jason?
Well, a few things. First is that I think we have to all acknowledge that the sum total of the videos that are coming out of Iran, which is a large country of 92 million people, okay? But so it's only a snapshot of what we are seeing on the ground. But nevertheless, all of the videos that are coming out on social media depict a clear tint of preference for the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. I have seen in this round of protests a definite uptick in chants for Javid Shah, this is the last battle, Pahlavi will return, then in other cycles. And I think we all have to acknowledge that analytically. I think there are some people who, because they doubt the Crown Prince's ability and have some personal views which may be thinking that he's not up to the task, tend to conflate those feelings with what is happening on the ground. And so what is happening on the ground is something different. And those brave Iranians who are taking to the streets are making it known that there is nostalgia for the Pahlavi era, and that is very real. And I think we have to all acknowledge that. Now, how that translates into an alternative to the Islamic Republic, I don't have the answer for that. I think that there are many Iranians who view Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as a transitional figure and as someone who is trusted by many Iranians and as a household name. I don't hear any other person's name being chanted specifically at these protests. So I think we all have to acknowledge that as analysts. Now,
And
hmm.
oh, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say what I find fascinating to add to that point, and I was going to ask you guys about this, is we're not hearing women life freedom. We're not hearing Zan Zendegi Azadi on the streets of across the country.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, that's not to say that the values of the woman life freedom movement have eroded or have been Iranians don't feel very strongly about that. I think they do, but what they are doing is expressing and starting to think about political alternatives to the Islamic Republic, and so that is what I would say differentiates this round of protests from the 2022 to 2023 cycle. Now, when it gets to succession within the Islamic Republic itself, I think that Mojtaba has been considered a candidate for a very long time to succeed his father, but that was we're in a very different moment in the current context, and I would say that the succession race, if you will, within the Islamic Republic is wide open, and Khamenei and his ilk, to preserve his legacy, may not want Mojtaba to necessarily be the next person in line. So they may try to anoint an Ayatollah who's very old or a figurehead as a placeholder, which would then be used for Mojtaba to remain behind the scenes to preserve his power and authority, and then maybe eventually succeeding that said Ayatollah. Or there could be an IRGC strongman if they decide to really dilute the power of the office of the supreme leader. An Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps strongman like Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, who, by the way, owes his political career to Iran's supreme leader and Mojtaba Khamenei. So they might try to do, use all of these different schemes to create the illusion of change when in fact things have not changed within the Islamic Republic system. I think what we're witnessing is an Islamic Republic that has reached a dead end. It has no answers for the Iranian people. It's politically paralyzed, and people are just waiting for Khamenei to die. And so within the fact that they are so paralyzed, that opens up the space for alternatives to the Islamic Republic, which is why another factor of why we're seeing the Iranian people really being motivated to take matters into their own hands.
And you just spoke of Ghalibaf. According to the French media, apparently his family is trying to get a visa to go to France.
I'm a little skeptical of these reports. In every round of protests, I hear a variation of the same stories. One is that Khamenei has made plans to escape
Go to
Russia. If things get really bad in Tehran. Another is that elites within the Islamic Republic are trying to request visas or passports for their family members to escape. So I think a healthy dose of caution and is warranted in some of these reports. But I am very skeptical that Ayatollah Khamenei will die outside of Iran. I think he will die in Iran.
Agreed. I don't think Khamenei is fleeing anytime soon. I just want to pick up again on what Jason. I think this is really interesting. The point about, and this is the thing we keep coming back to about these protests. The thing about women, life, freedom is that it was an issue-based protest. These aren't issue-based protests anymore. These are existential. It is, Mogbot, Khamenei, it is Shah Pahlavi, whatever. But each of these phrases is about, we've just had enough. It's over. In terms of the behind-the-scenes jostling, yes. I was watching for a while before a lot of this kicked off. You saw this campaign inside the Islamic Republic to really sort of burnish Mojtaba's credentials. So they wheeled out this old man. Did you see this old Ayatollah from Qom who was so reactionary? That next to him, Mojtaba was this very progressive young man. So I think that he's being groomed for some kind of leadership position. The IRGC is very interested because ironically, it was, of course, Rafsanjani who let them into the economy into the 80s. And that's what really made them strong. To a degree, it's a Praetorian state already. But I think the point is, beyond the speculation of what actually happens, is when that moment comes, there will be weakness. And look, there's another thing we've got to think about here, right? When we talk about regime change, is the Israeli factor. Now, when I looked and I was sent to Israel to cover the 12-day exchange, and, the Israelis were sending me the night vision of all the commandos wandering around on the ground. Now, as I made the point repeatedly, these weren't little Jewish boys and girls running around. They would have been a few Mossad, but they would have been Iranians, a lot of these people, okay? When nuclear scientists are whacked in Tehran, it's not Israelis on the ground, it's Iranians. Now, they're being guided. Now, something we have to think about. Even 10 years ago, I don't think Israelis would have had, or Israeli operatives would have had that much freedom of operation on the ground. There is such hatred now of the regime that they were able to operate quite openly on the ground. And yes, that's a lot to do with the skill, but it's also a lot to do with the people. There's so many more people on the ground. Now, the Israelis, whatever they say, want regime change. It's interesting to see how them and the Americans, might try to encourage this. The Israelis are much better than the Iranians at kinetic warfare. The Iranians have always been really good at political warfare. It remains to be seen how good the Israelis are at that. But if I were the Israelis, I'd be certainly trying to encourage any opposition forces they can, and I'm sure they are, to what degree of success that will to what degree of success they'll achieve, I don't know. But that's another factor we need to take into account.
And David, actually, you were recently in Tel Aviv and you interviewed former Mossad chief Yossi
Yeah,
Cohen, who was the head of the Mossad, who oversaw that the nuclear heist many years ago. Did he give you any insight? Did you pick up on anything that you'd like to share here?
I mean, unfortunately, he didn't divulge anything secret to me. He's a very sophisticated and polished man. They call him the model, quite literally, a very, very good looking man. Look, we talked a bit about this. And, he talked about, you keep the pressure on. Ultimately, we have to be clear. This will come down to the Iranian people. Any help the Israelis, the Americans might give, any actions will be to help the Iranian people achieve their own self-determination. So we're not talking about the perfect conspiracies of the Ayatollahs here. But everything we're talking about, incremental change, keeping the pressure on. This is why it's really important that Jason does what he does, that you do what you do. It's about understanding, we are all scarred by Iraq, and that's fair enough, But there comes a point where sometimes you have to think, okay, we're not going to go and invade Iran, but these people are out risking their lives every single day. It is in our interest for them to even beyond common humanity. Iran is the geopolitical ordering principle of the Middle East. Look where it sits between, the Caspian Basin and the Persian Gulf. Look at its population. Iran is a very, very pro-West. I talk about my really not very, very impressive days of studying Persian in Iran. It's the only place in the world someone's asked me to teach them English in an American accent. As a Brit, it was incredibly offensive, but it's instructive about just how keen they are to engage with the world, to engage with the West. This is a country with excellent universities. Look, we know they've got excellent nuclear scientists from their nuclear program. Yep. This is a country that wants to be free. And when it is free, it really will change the global calculus.
Yeah, when I traveled in Iran in 2007, people were say, "Oh, you're from North America. Oh, we love, Americans. We love Canadians." Like that's really the norm for anywhere, even in rural areas. And I noticed that in the universities that their textbooks, a lot of their textbooks were in English, which was also quite
Yeah.
incredible to see. And I just wanted to go back to this video footage that we've been seeing in some small towns in Iran where the local, like Nuri Entizami, the local police force, are waving and cheering on the protesters. Now, I know, of course, they're not Sepah, they're not the IRGC. There is a difference between the two forces, but still, that's something that incredible, something we haven't seen in past protests. What do you guys make of that?
Yeah, I think it's very noteworthy. Let's not forget that the police force is really controlled in many respects by the IRGC. It reports to the supreme leader ultimately.
Ahmed Radan.
Exactly. Ahmad Radan is an IRGC commander, a career one. So that's a very important signpost as to the potential erosion within the police. And we'll have to see how that, what happens on that front. But it's also critical to note that the Islamic Republic has a layered system of suppression, with the police being on the front line and then the besieged and the IRGC. And so they have a lot of manpower to suppress these protests, and I don't think we should underestimate that. They have a lot in reserve still that they have not fully unleashed on the Iranian people. So we probably have to be humble in our predictions here. But I want to go back to how the United States can best help this situation. I think President Trump's Truth Social post was absolutely unprecedented and really met the moment in terms of giving inspiration to the Iranian people. And you could see after he put out that Truth Social post, the intensity and the geography of the protests spread. So I think that shows you the power of the pulpit of the American president. Now, I think we do have to move beyond Truth Social posts to tangible actions that can help the Iranian people. I think the United States has the ability to jam the Islamic Republic's ability to shut off the internet, jam its surveillance capabilities, and to target the suppressive apparatus of the Islamic Republic in conjunction with the Israelis. So those options should be on the table for President Trump. So cyber operations, kinetic action, and potentially covert action as well. Those are all policy options. I do also think what would be very important is for the Trump administration to implement the Massa Act. It is now law. It is well overdue for it to be implemented. It is a piece of law that authorizes the president to impose sanctions on Iran's supreme leader and other senior regime officials for human rights abuses. And so just sanctioning Ali Khamenei under human rights abuses would send a message to the people in Iran on the ground that we hear you. And he's illegitimate. And we are amplifying and echoing your call. That's absolutely very powerful. I also believe, lastly, that the Justice Department should issue a federal criminal indictment against Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader. Just if it could do so with Nicolas Maduro, it could do so with Ali Khamenei. I'm not saying that the Trump administration is necessarily going to mount a seizure operation like they did against Nicolas Maduro with Ali Khamenei in Iran, but just the fact that they're indicting him would be a very powerful message to the Iranian street as to where the United States stands here. And I think the Trump administration should do it.
Yeah. Remind me, has Khamenei been indicted by the ICC?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, funny that. I would also say, just a quick point, following from Jason, he talks about the power of Trump's tweet. We are locked and loaded. From Obama, we got, the world is watching you, when the mullahs were massacred in 2009. So you know what? I'd say, funnily enough, that is progress.
No, it definitely is progress on that end. And I just wanted to conclude by giving you guys a mic on how you're feeling right now. Like the three of us, we have dedicated so much of our lives to Iran and to what, I mean, it's all come to this moment now. How are you guys feeling right now?
Fine. Go, Jason, sorry.
Oh, okay. I feel inspired by the Iranian people. I really do. They amaze me every week, truly, with the scenes that I see, brave scenes of civil disobedience that, never get any national or international news coverage. But their courage and their really motivation and desire to see the Islamic Republic fall is inspiring. I've always believed that the Iranian people are the greatest allies the United States can have in Iran. And if they would overtake and take over their country and reclaim it from the Ayatollah and usher in a government which is at peace with the world, it could be a geopolitical game changer.
And David, you have a...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, David, you obviously have a very special connection to Iran. How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I mean, my family fled Iran in the late 1970s. You know, they had the Basij sitting, my grandmother had the Basij sitting in our house before they all went to London. Look, no people deserves to be oppressed by savages. But of all the people, the Iranian people, you know, they're so wonderful. They're so talented. You know, it just, what sums it up is many years ago when I was a student, we had, just before Mahmoud Ahmadinejad took power, the Iranian ambassador to London came to see us. He was this urbane man. He had a PhD from MIT or something. Anyway, Ahmadinejad came in. We met his successor. This idiot didn't speak English. He was the ambassador to the UK. It was like having a Persian exam, speaking to him in his nylon shirt. And I just think, you know, I remember thinking, this is the face of Iran to the world. My God, I'm getting very Iranian now, Negar, the snobbery. This is the face of Iran. Nobody deserves this, but of all people, the Iranian people. And I want to say this again. When there are people going, oh, what's this got to do with us? There's problems here. Understand, a sane Iran is a benefit to the world, geopolitically, economically, culturally, and as a holiday destination. There's no downside. Everybody benefits. Long live Iran. Down with the Islamic Republic.
Thank you so much to you all. That's Jason Brodsky and David Patrikarakos joining us on Eye for Iran. Well, if you like this episode, hit the like button, leave us a comment. And you can also sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. We deliver what you need to know on Iran. And you can also check out our dedicated English website at iranintl.com/en.